Sometimes as DMs, we make things very complicated for ourselves. I don't think we mean to, but sometimes things just happen. We have a cool idea, we want to do something, we want to run with it, we write down all these rules. Sometimes they're very simplistic rules, they look like that makes sense to me, and then you go to run them, and just drives you nuts, and you just want to kick a kitten through a fan. Hey everybody, this is DM Mike, and this is the next campaign diary. I'm 20, 21, I don't know. But anyway, we are still in. Actually, we're out of Parnas technically. The characters went chasing off after the castle. But it was a relatively short session. It was about 2.5 hours, maybe 3. And we immediately picked up right where we left off. We had a new radio drama, which you can find probably posted before this. The radio drama number 17. It's something to do with crickets and her visions and different things she's having. We started with that, and then we right into the same night where we left off. And Althea's in a trance. Everybody's trying to get their 8 hours because nobody has slept in a very long time. I was not allowing them to level up until they rested and they got to civilization, which both were capable. They both were there, the civilization and the rest. It was just whether or not they got through the night. And I really felt like it would be unfair for me not to let them get through the night because it's been so long since anybody's able to rest or do anything. Maybe I could have gone Dark Souls on them, made it really, really difficult, but I decided not to. There was a slim chance. There was a slim chance things might happen. But anyway, they did. They got their rest, and the wheelwright they met from last session showed up, and he said, hey, look, he's out at night, and there's a lot of things that are going on outside. Matter of fact, Bayleet, or Cricket, and Althea, they were spotting things going on in Parnas under the darkness, right? So wagons going into the castle really, really late at night, and there were dark shadows moving through the alleyways and the streets, these people in black hoods, right? So things were happening, things were becoming unsettling, and this is what the watch was seeing, meaning everybody who took watch in the camp, or in the inn that they were staying. So they were already kind of on high alert, and by like 5 in the morning, the wheelwright shows up and says, look, they've got you surrounded. Everybody's out there. Talus, the trolls, the cultists, they know you're here. They're coming to get you. And then a great shudder went through Parnas, and the castle was disconnecting and starting to rise, right? And right before this, overnight, Cricket did spot Asbaroth, which you can hear him leaving in one of my previous radio dramas, I think number 15 or 16, Wizards and Warriors. And she saw him go to the castle, and she was like, that's the guy who connected me to the portal and started to drain me. He's the guy who had that idea. He's the one who helped torture me. I need to find him, and I want to kill him. Right? So that was one motivation to get to the castle. Cricket was very adamant about doing this. Well, the wheelwright came in there, and they all woke up. They're all refreshed. They've all leveled up. So everybody's got a little, a few more powers, a few more hit points. And he managed to sneak them out through the basement, through a secret compartment there. And funny enough, I just ran with this. It was a big blunder on my part, but I was using Tabletop Simulator. I'll put something up here. It's a little thing I did of Parnas, and I had the map backwards. So where the castle, let's say, should be up here, I had accidentally twisted it. I turned it 180, and so I was coming out the back of the inn thinking, okay, the Wyvern stable is right this way, and I ended up walking right into the castle. I screwed something up big time. It was just odd. I don't know what I was thinking. I just got confused, so we played it off. It wasn't like, okay, everybody, never mind, you actually went this way. Nope. I played it off as the old man got confused. It was a really silly moment. And now he had to lead them, back across the street and then up again to get to the stables.
We were all under pressure. Goodbye.
It was a bit of a goof, which actually speaks to me really well because I'm very directionally challenged. After that correction, they made it to the stables. Now let me backtrack because I just forgot something. When they were leaving the inn, one of the Althea, the druid, has this power, and I can't remember what it's called, but they can do a campsite in the Feywild, so you don't see anything, you don't see fires that are lit. It's kind of a really safe campsite. Well, right before they left, Mortimer got the great idea. Mortimer and Pax helped to burn down the inn. Burn it down and just start a fire, right? So they went to the second floor, they gathered all the lamp oil and the wax, all the different candles and torches in there, put them in one of the rooms, poured all this oil, and just started this fire. And of course the ferry campsite's still going, so no one knows, as all the enemies are rushing in, that the inn, at least a chunk of it, is on fire. All right, so they were trying to use that as diversion and maybe trap a few of them. I can't believe I forgot to mention that. It was just like one of those things I was like, what? Anyway, they do make it eventually to the Wyvern stables, and I had it where the Wyvern stables open from the top, right? So they don't just open like this, like barn doors, and the Wyverns walk out. There's chained mechanisms to gears that someone needs to pull to open the roof, and from there the Wyverns can leap out into the air. And by the time they got to the stables, the enemy had bum rushed the inn, trying to figure out what was going on and wanted to kill them, and then realized the inn's on fire. There's no way they're there. They've gotten out. They started searching, and eventually they found their way to the stable. So they were trying to break into the stable while everybody else was putting saddles on the Wyverns and grabbing this is what I did. I had lances and shields up on the walls for the Wyverns. Everybody had to wear belts around their waist, which would connect to the saddles that would go onto the beast, right? And they had to do a bunch of animal handling checks. And this latched the players in to the saddles in case the Wyvern kind of flies and does this, or this wind shear or something like that, just so they don't fall off. So they had to get all this gear together. And then I did handouts. If you're doing this is a good way to do it. I think not the complicated way, it's a good way. I gave them handouts of what the Wyvern can do and the actions they can take and the weapons they would have, right? So all the stats, pretty much stats, everything you would need. So they're not like, what do I hit with a lance, or what's the reach on this? No, it was all there, right? So that was a good thing. All right, so they're arming themselves. They got heavy crossbows, and the guy driving the Wyvern could not use any of those things, could not use ranged weapons. He had to be driving, or he could use the lance. He couldn't do both. He couldn't, grab the heavy crossbow from his friend and use that. Just, it wasn't going to happen, right? So I also told them for the first time to count their ammunition. Everybody who was driving a Wyvern had 10 bolts that used in the heavy crossbow. And one of the characters, I think, grabbed a second quiver. These were heavy bolts, so any more than that would have been too cumbersome. But as they finally got themselves together, everybody geared up or paired up, the 2 per Wyvern, and I had them just say, look, I had made tokens. Let me open them up here. Tokens, Wyvern 1, Wyvern 2, Wyvern 3. Just pick your Wyvern, and that's the Wyvern you're on. So as you can see, it was starting out pretty simple. Keyword there, starting out pretty simple, at least for them. But anyway, so the old man, the wheelwright, they finally get everything they need. He opens up, boom, they go flying out. I started music right there, some very specific music that was meant to capture the moment. But anyway, they fly out and they see Parnast, the castle is disconnected completely from Parnast, and it's going down the trench. And this is where sometimes as a DM, you're on the other side of the DM screen, pulling your hair out, metaphorically, pulling your hair out, and you're not sure how things are going. And it feels like things are falling apart before your eyes, and like you missed something, and oh my gosh, you didn't plan for that, and when the reality was on the other side, people were okay. They were fine. People were okay. It's kind of it's a little bit of a long story there, and I won't going to get all the specifics. But I'm sure you've had those moments as running a campaign where you're not sure people are having a good time and you feel like it's falling apart. Everybody else is doing just great, and they're actually really, really enjoying it. I had one of those nights where I just could not read the table. I couldn't figure it out. And I was starting to fall apart behind the DM screen. And one of those things is just, I tried to make things really simple. Let me put some maps up here. You can see the Wyvern Run. There's a whole map that'll be released. Maybe it'll be already released by this campaign diary, maybe not. But the Wyvern Run, I spent so much time on this, and as soon as I started up that map, the tokens were acting weird, and I couldn't use them, so that led us to doing this entire scenario with the Wyverns, flying through this trench, trying to catch up to the castle, and 5 other cultists on Wyvern right behind them, all in the imagination. We had to do it, which is not unheard of, right? It's not something that's wrong with D&D, but I had, it was a lot of aerial combat and moving through like Z space, like just X, Y, Z, like there's all different things you could have done, and it would have been so much easier to have the tokens. And then when the tokens started freaking out, it took like 10 minutes, 8 minutes or something like that, which just feels like eternity, basically, to get just 2 tokens to sit on the board. I don't know what was going on with it that night. And then I gave up. I just said, forget it.
I'm getting out of here. Now.
We're going to do this theater of the mind. And I think that's one thing that kind of panicked me a little bit. Really 85 to 90% of what we do in D&D is theater of the mind. That last 10% is usually just kind of combat where you're putting a token on the table. And I guess I've acclimated to that. That is what I am used to. And I like to see where people exactly are. It just makes things really 1,000 times easier. But we were doing already a pretty complicated scenario on a complicated map with rules that I had to come up with based on, 5e rules, but adjustments. And no one's done this before, and I haven't done this before, and it just, it swelled. It felt like way too much. And then on top of that, the map not working that I had spent hours and hours on, I was really excited about. So here's what we did. We did a theater of the mind, and I have this huge TV that would sit up behind me, and I would just show the map and give them an idea of where they're at. Okay, right now you're in this part of the tunnel, right? You're in this part of the tunnel. There's ice spires everywhere. You can zigzag. You can turn left. And so that's what I did. And I found out later, I talked to my players afterwards. I was like, okay, oh gosh, just give me the truth. Give me the truth. What, was that okay? Was that worth it? And they did. They actually liked the idea. They did say it was a little complicated at times because once your turn is over, you kind of forget what enemy's closest to you. And that gets a little, if they're close, are they up high? Are they below? Are they in front of you? Are they way back here? Because we're all over the place because we're flying. So that was 100%. I understood that. A little difficult. It was difficult for me. And I was keeping track of, 10 people. So that was difficult. But having the map, the 3D map running and just me pushing it forward slowly to show them where they were at helped. I think that kind of took some of the stress off. And it made it a little bit easier. So they enjoyed that. I'm just bummed that I didn't get to use the map the way I wanted to. It would have been 1,000 times easier. But anyway, it's just one of those things. And here's what I did to enhance the experience. So we're flying around. You can use your crossbows. You can, any other ranged weapon you have. You can lance. You can do these kinds of things. But one thing I think made it a little more exciting was I would hit them at random. Sometimes in your turn, nothing would happen. Sometimes in your turn, I would have you roll 5, 6, 7 different animal handling rolls as you're suddenly ice spire, get past it, ice spire, get past it, ice spire. Just like flying all over the place, and they weren't expecting it. And sometimes if they failed, the wyvern kind of turns, boom, someone might fall out of their saddle. But of course they're hooked in, so no problems, right? But they would sometimes do a strength check at that moment because they stay in their saddle. Sometimes they would hit one of the spires because it's fog, it's clouds, it's atmosphere, it's mist. Not all the dragon can't quite see everything either, so it's trying to make sure it doesn't crash. But every once in a while, we would have people hit one of those spires, and then we would just kind of do blunt damage rolls. The wyvern would be hit, and everybody on the saddles would be hit to make it simple, even though things weren't feeling very simple that night. But it was things like that. I would just hit them, boom, 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 one after the other. And I'd say to them sometimes, left or right, up or down. And I would just base my DC numbers off that. It was really like hip firing. Just from the hip, boom, 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 boom. What do you want to do? So I think that made it, if you're going to do a wyvern run, like they're being chased or whatnot, I would highly recommend you do some kind of rapid fire DC number checks, animal handling, as they're spinning, turning, whatever it may be. I mean, I guess it depends on what your map looks like, if you have debris and different things coming at them. But I really wanted that excitement. I wanted not just flying straight, nothing's going on besides somebody shooting an arrow at you. All right, so I wanted a little bit more action, if you will. But anyway, so that was, it all probably sounds simple. And matter of fact, when everybody left, it was like immediately I thought of 5 different things that could have changed that made it so much easier. It's just one of those things. In the moment, you're panicking and you're like, oh gosh, and you can't tell how people are doing. And I remember, oh gosh, Althea, the person who plays Althea, looked at me. Someone said something to me because I had my head down like this, and I was trying to figure out something. And I think because I couldn't read the room, right? I was thinking, are you guys, is this okay? Is this working for you? And I got this enthusiastic, oh yes, we're having a good time, yes. And I'm like, oh my God, because I'm having a nightmare back here. And it'll be on the podcast sooner or later. You'll hear it. But that's what it felt like, like everything was just coming unraveled. And I thought to myself, why did I prep? I prepped all this crap and it's falling apart in front of me. But, big old but, I think when I look back on it now, yes, there were some complications, but it actually worked. It was okay that we got through it. And now I know 5 or 6 things I would definitely change to make it a little bit easier. So when flight combat happens, or let's say I lose my map and I can't use it anymore, I think I know how to handle it a little bit better. So sometimes you just got to do something to find out how to do it. Right? You have to fail at it, even though it wasn't really a complete failure. Just a couple things here and there. So now that I've done it, I understand a little bit better, and I think I can run it a little bit better next time. But anyway, long story short, you can see they got through the trench, and eventually, I had this moment. I like doing this every once in a while. I don't do it often. It's kind of a rare thing. But I had one of those, I don't know what to call these spectacles. We'll call it spectacles, right? Spectacle moment, where something just pure up fantasy happens. You're not really interacting with it. It's just something that is there. And while they're all flying in the trench, this is about an hour into combat, suddenly everybody, all of them lined up, all the enemy, they're chasing each other. The shadow goes over everybody, the trench, the people, the wyverns, everything. And I had some great music attached to this, just some great music, if I may say so. And they all look up. And it's Linathan, all the way from chapter 1. Linathan has showed up, and he is hovering and flying way above them. Their wyverns are like this. Linathan's kind of like, that, right? So he is just flying, and there's all these little wyverns. They're all looking up, and there's purple lightning igniting from his underbelly, just because of his energy, because of who he is, his magic, his arcana of being a dragon. Purple lightning was just kind of scattering and reflecting off of him and hitting some of the spires and hitting some of the mountainside. It wasn't hitting them. It wasn't lethal to them. But you could just see his aurora. And I had it kind of described as like Star Wars when the Star Destroyer goes over. It just keeps going and going and going. It's huge. That was that moment. And it's just what I call a spectacle moment. It's just something that happens in the adventure. Not every session. It'd be too much, right? Then it's not anything that's cool. I think in this whole time I've had 2 in a year, 2. And I just wanted that. I just saw it as a great visual for my players. And I had used some music from Ark, the Ark soundtrack. I think it was some of their DLC soundtracks. And man, it was just perfect. Absolutely perfect. I love those kind of moments. It's not something you're really interacting with. It's just something that helps bring the world alive. And I think some of my players were still like, oh my gosh, here comes a dragon. Like there was this moment like we got to deal with this guy. But no, that didn't happen at all, right? So he was flying towards the castle as well. But eventually the bad guys who were cut down by half and losing more every other round finally leveled off and left. And they did some insight checks and they found that the wyverns themselves knew how to go to the castle and where to land. So they kind of let the reins go, and just let the wyverns come in, and they landed at the castle, and that's where we ended. So it was a pretty good night. It was an unusual beginning. It was an uncertain night for me as a DM. Behind the screen, here I am with a cutscene I'm not sure about. I think I just talked about this in the radio drama. Wasn't too sure about that particular scene. So it starts off weird for me, right? And then, we have this stuff that's going on in the inn, and then I screw up the old man who's like, oh, wait, we're totally off, and it was just like this blundering thing that I did. And then, the whole thing I was excited about just, for me, felt like it fell on its face, but actually wasn't all that bad at all. And my players were actually having a good time. As a DMs, you're supposed to sit back and you need to read the room, and I think I'm pretty good at that. I know, like, I've been calling our games a little bit earlier because I could tell people are tired, and it's not because they're bored, but they're just tired. It's been a long week. But I had a hard time Friday night really reading the room, and I think it was because I was so distracted with the stuff that was going on behind the screen, just trying to keep up with it all. So that kind of stole my mojo, I guess, in a way. And my observation of things. So as a DM, just, be cautious of that. It's easy to say right now, but in the moment when you're panicking a little bit and you have a little bit of anxiety about things, you may not remember. So, it was a mixed night, a night where the DM was struggling, but the players were having a good time. So it's one of those things. But anyway, guys, we meet again, not next Friday, but the Friday after. And then, I don't know, maybe a couple more sessions and we're done. And then we're going to take a break and then we'll hit Rise of Tiamat. All right, guys, that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
We were all under pressure. Goodbye.